All right, so now that we discussed how to look at the peoples that are all around us and leveraging the moments, the in between, and noticing the synchronicities, the deja vu dots, all those concepts that we can really take advantage of. Now, let's talk about leveraging those moments to exit the matrix, to unplug ourselves. So, we're going to talk about the Renaissance, beyond morality, beyond humanity, becoming amortal, which is an actual thing people are working towards, and the simulation trilemma, what is known as base reality, and finally, how to exit the game. Same disclaimers before. Remember that this is just for entertainment purposes only. It is not cool nor morally right to ambush someone who is not perceptually mature enough to digest these ideas. An idea is one of the most cancerous things out there. You can't remove it once it's planted. So be very careful who you're sharing this stuff with. And remember, ignorance is bliss. What is useful is more important than what is true. So let people live in peace. Do not be abusive. All right, so before we get into the actual technicalities, we need to recognize a moment in history that changed absolutely everything, and this period was the Enlightenment. So people just casually throw around the word enlightenment, but I know they truly don't understand the tectonic shift this moment in time had on the collective psyche of humanity. In French, this is known as the Renaissance or the rebirth, and it quite literally was that. It was a complete rebirth of the human psyche. So Rene Descartes, he actually opened a portal. So what happened before then is that there were certain concepts like the Platonic forms and basically ideas that things are true because they are, like things that you and we don't really consider, we don't even think about, things such as truth, things such as good and evil, concepts such as beauty, these types of concepts. Like we weren't thinking about them. We just take them in. And I know that my psychology is too calcified at this point to argue against it. But Descartes did something very profound. He did something that not even Socrates could do way back. Like everyone was talking about, how can you prove that you're real? How can you prove that you are you? And he said, well, the only thing I'm sure of is not my location, because if I close my eye, I have no idea where I am, really. I wake up and I'm just in this simulation. I'm in this moment now. The only thing that I am 100% aware of is my cognition, is that I'm thinking. So he says, I think, therefore I am. Now, it's hard to describe exactly how monumental this idea was when it entered the mainstream circles. Our senses are extremely unreliable. It's like the spaces between your fingers. When you're swiping through the air, you're dragging your arm throughout the air. There's still space between your fingers. You can't touch everything. It's just incomplete. Your senses are incomplete. Your five senses, they're incomplete. There's space. Freud actually argued against Descartes' idea. He thinks that we don't have that 100% autonomy. Freud argued against the idea of our mind being our overwhelming governor. Freud actually said that we had autonomous sub-personalities and urges that are intelligent in and of themselves, and those can determine a large amount of our lives. So there is a lot happening underneath the surface, like the iceberg, that is not accessible to your awareness. And this is actually somewhat true. We looked at some psychology and we know that our memory systems are actually segmented. We don't have one main memory system. We have a separate memory system for semantics, so like for words and understanding of words. We have a separate memory system for actions. So if you want to learn how to backflip, for instance, that is actually stored in a different part of your brain. And we have a different memory system for imagination. So it keeps your dreams as dreams. Like it's really hard to blend the two. That is how we can dream things that we don't know. So what this moment did, though, with Descartes is that it opened a period of humanism and it started this movement of, I believe, immense hubris. But I think if you can manage it correctly, it can actually be very powerful. But people started looking within, and one could argue that's the biggest Luciferian crime, is to believe you are God, to believe that you have all the answers yourself, that you are the judge, you are the executioner. But there is a beauty in being able to self-analyze and realize that, okay, I may not be what they told me I am, and starting to dive deep and be like, oh my gosh, what is going on here? There's multiple layers. So we're going to dive deep into that. The main concept here is a lot of people, they don't even understand what they don't understand. Like, are you your mind? Do you truly believe that you are your mind? We're never going to get the full picture of what's going on. And it's been described in philosophical circles before, but when you do get close to the divine, you see certain things. It's actually looking at God's back. Like, you will never be able to see his face. You will never be able to comprehend God because he is incomprehensible. It is just overwhelming to us. It's like taking a fish and putting him in onto the fucking moon, right? You put him in a fishbowl and you put him on the moon. He doesn't know what he's looking at. It's just overwhelming for him, right? So can you truly know something that you can't understand? If you were to see God, you wouldn't even know what's happening. So I think it's a bit hubristic to think that I am that I am. I think there is something much deeper going on. We're going to get into the simulation theory in this module, but that's this wormhole that was opened up by Descartes, I think, was a mistake. So there's been a domino effect that's happened as a consequence, and I'm not going to see this progression myself in my lifetime, but there's going to be a new type of human. And actually, we had a genius, a misunderstood genius, who recognized all this, and his name was Friedrich Nietzsche. And he realized that with this new self-realization, we're going to develop a species of human that goes beyond our Platonic, our Greek ideals of good and evil. You and I, we don't even second guess the concept of good and evil. Like, we believe that it's black and white. There's certain things that are just moral, certain things that are not moral. We have a morality code that we're just ingrained with, right? We have not questioned it for thousands of years. But Nietzsche says that the time is going to come that we're going to have a transmutation of values. And we had a really big shift into that with the Renaissance. That was the biggest shift in values in modern time. Like I said, like, humanity has had different sets of values, different sets of moralities. For instance, if you read any of the ancient Greeks, like way before, like, these people were obsessed with violence. They were psychologically different from us. They wouldn't understand the things we do. These people were phenomenologically completely different from us. So to be phenomenological is to relate to someone's awareness or experience of something rather than the thing itself. So Nietzsche argues that there's going to be a new species of human, a different, completely psychologically superior type of human, who is known as the Superman or the Übermensch. So the Übermensch would be as alien to us as we are to chimpanzees. And humanity's noblest task is to cultivate the soil so that the Übermensch could come into existence. All of human evolution, all the stress, all the strain is justified only by being the intermediary stage to a higher, more beautiful species. I don't consider myself an Übermensch. Nietzsche doesn't consider himself an Übermensch. This is a completely different type of person. We've seen hints of it in people like Napoleon, for instance, but as Nietzsche put it, entire peoples, epochs, and civilizations are often just as a means to a single great human being. So this is what he's going to be. What are the characteristics of an Übermensch, if you remember it from the intellectual modules? An Übermensch determines their own reality. They form their own values. They take other people's wisdom only as a source of inspiration. It's like a tailored suit. A suit looks really good on the rack, cool, but it only looks amazing when it's tailored to you and your form, right? So these people are capable of taking values as they come and as they go when it serves them. So it's a relative morality these people have. But not everyone can be an Übermensch. You have to have a set of skills. You have to be able to provide results. And there's a touch of altruism there, but these people, they just operate by different rules. And if you notice the world, like the people who are hyper successful, a lot of these people play by their own rules, but they're not yet Übermensches because they still believe in these Greek values of good and evil. In order to live life authentically, you need to be able to stop following the safe path blindly. So on the right here, we have some of Nietzsche's biggest contributions to psychology, the idea of will to power, the overman or the Übermensch, slave/master morality. I really wish we could get into these more in depth because I love these concepts, but this is the main idea, is that we are preparing the future for a type of human that is a moral relativist. I will never get there. I will never be there. I have too much Catholic dogma in my psyche. I can't do it, but this is the future. Nietzsche's opus magnus, or his masterwork, was this book called Thus Spoke Zarathustra. And in there, he talks about this 3-step metamorphosis that someone has to do to become an Übermensch. So the 3 steps to become an Übermensch are the following. The first is that you must become a camel. Now, we all start here, and some of us never leave this phase. This is the phase where we let other people tell us what is right or wrong. Like, we get indoctrinated with religion. We take on other people's biases. We live our life based on how society tells us we should. After a while, the camel can't handle all the weight it's been carrying and becomes confronted with the lack of real meaning in their lives. These are the loneliest of deserts. So the camel is the quintessential beast of burden. He takes on all the baggage of his history, culture, biology, spirituality, and he doesn't shy away from his kind's fears, desires, strengths, and weaknesses. His struggle and pursuit leave him alienated from his fellows, but he maintains his burden because he knows it's in the pursuit of truth and knowledge. Many people are like this. Most people are like this. They are in the camel stage. They just take what they're told and they move along and they muscle through. When the camel gets tired of this, he graduates into the next stage, which is to become a lion. Now, in this phase, the lion must fight the dragon, which represents the thou shall, like you must do this. The lion fights back against each of these doctrines. This can show up in many aspects of life. In the corporate world, such as fighting against stereotypes, toxic culture, inequality. In one's personal life, such as being authentic to oneself without shame. And in one's inner spiritual life, such as questioning one's true beliefs and what feeds the soul. The lion has limitations though. It can't create new values, but it can create freedom and space for new creation. There are many people who never make it past this phase, which is unfortunate because the next phase is the best one. And as a lion, you are the creature who is just consistently saying, I will, I will. He is the embodiment of will and courage. And he doesn't feel guilt. He's just breaking rules at this stage. He's not creating new rules, but he's just questioning authority. Now, the next stage is the best stage. The third stage is that you must become a child. Now, why must the praying lion still become a child? Because the child is innocence and forgetfulness, a new beginning, a sport, a self-propelling wheel, a first motion, a sacred yes. If you're lucky, you'll reach this stage. Imagine the best, happiest, most fearless part of you and being in that state regularly. You are fully present, you have no attachment of what should be happening, and you are in a state of wonder and play. This is the state where you create new and beautiful things, take risks, and create positive energy around you. It's the ultimate liberation of the spirit. So someone in this child stage of metamorphosis, they are people who have their own will. They are not self-conscious about their creativity. And most importantly, they put together ideas and concepts and morality in a way that's been bred out of most adults. They are in a state of play. They live in their own worlds. So this 3-step metamorphosis concept came from his opus magnus, his masterwork, Thus Spoke Zarathustra. The experience of reading Nietzsche is like philosophizing with a hammer. He takes an idea and just shatters it, and then you have to explore each of those tiny fragments of pieces, and he keeps doing it. So I have not finished this book. I've been trying for the last 4 years. It's filled with such depth and intensely deep ideas. I have to take breaks because I can't just finish the whole thing. So, but this is a concept within the book that is extremely powerful. I am trying to live in the child state of play. I recognize the biases I hold. I cannot do certain things. Moral relativism is something that I struggle with. I just can't do it. But this whole concept is something that's very eye-opening because as more people are not respecting the institutions we had before with God and monotheism, like people are replacing that with something else. And so we just have to be aware of the future moral relativists that are going to come out there. And eventually, maybe within our lifetime, maybe he's already born, we're going to get an Ubermensch to run the whole world. Now, there's already a plan to get there, to fast track that state. And I'm not really happy about it, but we have to discuss this. So let's discuss going beyond human. What is reality? We need to first define what's real, right? We have the advent of deepfakes. We have Greta Thunberg lying about rising sea levels. If you want to really go into a rabbit hole, check out who her family is. We're all getting tripped up over what's real and what's not. It's the belief that makes the difference. And if everyone is just constantly sharing lies, like most of the things that you have downloaded into your brain, you cannot verify. So we're technically all living in a state of delusion. So why not pick a delusion that serves you? There's an Orwellian concept that was first introduced in 1984, which is 2 plus 2 is 5. 2 plus 2 equals 5 is a concept that if the government or some overwhelming authority figure tells you something that you believe is not true, then who's right? Technically, the person with most resources and most leverage determines what's real. He determines what's reality. And you might think, oh, that's ridiculous. We can use a scientific method and prove certain things. Bullshit. If someone in China were to speak up, they're killed. And if you do that over years, over generations, people literally start believing lies. They actually did an experiment with fleas. They took a group of fleas, they put them in a jar, and they closed the lid. Now, throughout the whole day, these fleas were trying to jump and escape, but they kept hitting the top of the lid. So eventually they learned that they can't escape. So eventually, a day later, they removed the lid, And even still, throughout the rest of the time, these fleas would not escape the jar. They were conditioned to believe that they just can't escape. And now fleas reproduce really fast. So within a few days, they had a second generation of fleas, and they wouldn't even question it. They would not jump above the lid. They were conditioned that it was impossible. And the third generation don't even question it. Like, how many of these self-imposed, self-limiting beliefs have we downloaded ourselves? We don't really know what is real, what is not. So I think a healthy way to go about this, to move around the world, is to just question everything. Just be skeptical, because you don't really know what's real. Now let's jump back into our brains, that 3-pound mush between your ears. This determines your reality. Now, it's actually very interesting because people with psychosis, and particularly schizophrenia, they see things that aren't there. They have a completely different sense of reality than the quote unquote normal person. But schizophrenia, it actually affects 1% of adults. Like, these are a lot of people. But what I found curious, and they did a study on this in 2015, is that animals don't get schizophrenia. So what is going on here? What is happening? Well, we as humans, in our human genome, we have something known as HARs, or human accelerated regions. These are parts of our brains that have exploded in development. So this is somewhat correlated around the time that we discovered fire. We started digesting more foods without cooking. We started to actually absorb many of the calories instead of losing them through digestion. And so our brains just exploded in size. And so with complex function, that begets complex malfunction. And so these HARs, the human accelerated regions, actually exist on the schizophrenic affected areas in the human genome. So with human expression profiling, these areas, these genes, are actually involved in the prefrontal cortex and the hippocampus, the two areas most affected by schizophrenia. So people who have schizophrenia, their brains have dysfunction in these two regions, the prefrontal cortex and the hippocampus. The hippocampus is in charge of learning and memory. And what they found in people who have schizophrenia is that they have an excess of dopamine activity. So if you explore the most common antipsychotic medications on the left-hand side there, almost all of these are either dopamine blockers or glutamate blockers. If you have a ton of dopamine just shooting through your system, shooting through your brain all the time, you are going to jeopardize the health of your brain. That's just a fact. Now, I'm actually really concerned because a lot of kids, they didn't have an internet-free childhood. They're not playing outside. They are constantly getting dopamine spikes all day, all the time. And we haven't seen the consequences of this so far. It's only been a few years, but it cannot be healthy. So let's just define psychosis real fast. Psychosis refers to a collection of symptoms that affect the mind where there's been a loss of contact with reality. So if an entire generation of people's brains are being nuked by dopamine, then it is highly likely that they will be more susceptible to these schizophrenic and psychotic episodes. And what happens if you have someone who is mentally unwell, they're mentally susceptible, then you can get them on medications. And what happens when you have these people drugged out, you can actually double or triple or quadruple the effectiveness of your mass hypnosis, your programming. So I think that we need to be extremely careful of how much dopamine we're putting into our bodies, because we are seeing a huge spike in mental illness. And I don't think it's by accident. I think it's by design. And why do I think it's by design? Because there are certain powerful people, and we're going to get to in the next slide, who want to accelerate this human evolution. They want to become Ubermenches already. And we are actually getting really, really close. So this man in the middle here, he's Brian Johnson. I believe he's the brainchild of Venmo, and he just made a bunch of money, right? And now he's trying to reduce his biological age. I believe he's in his 50s or 40s, but he is biologically 18 years old. Like, his blood samples, he's documenting it all on YouTube. It's actually really fascinating. But so we are in a time now where we're actually trying to become amortal. So there is a species of animal on the planet who is already amortal. And that is this type of jellyfish, the Dorney jellyfish. So the Dorney, it actually cannot die. So if it's sick, if it has some kind of malfunction, it just shreds off that piece and it just regenerates new cells. And so unless it is eaten by a shark, or unless some physical thing happens to it, it will live forever. Isn't that fascinating? That is what's called being amortal. Now, that's different from immortal, because an immortal person cannot be killed. But if we can actually use, remember what we talked about the telomeres and the physical mastery? We are actually using the Harvard lab by Dr. David Sinclair and all these different tactics. We are actually seeing people reduce their biological age by decades. And so if we can get people into a state of amortality where they can live forever, their genes don't age, then we can literally just start putting people in pods and we can have their brains being hyperactive and stimulated, and we can introduce them into virtual realities, AGs, all kind of stuff. But these people are still susceptible to physical injury. So that's why if you were to pay millions of dollars to become amortal, you highly likely would not expose yourself to the risk of being run over by a car or breaking your bones. Like, you wouldn't want that. So in fact, these people who get to reach this stage, your Disneys, like all these guys, they are put into these chambers that they can just live on technically forever. And that's where we get to the simulation theory. And we are in a simulation. It's just by the law of probability. So we already have the Oculus, we have the Meta glasses, we have all these different types of VR coming out. And the brain is actually pretty dumb. If you have the right visual stimulus, you will believe what you're seeing. And if you don't believe me, if you ever tried the roller coaster thing, like your body feels like it's there. Because of the 5 senses, your vision, it actually has the most neurons attached to your brain. So actually people who are blind, for instance, they actually suffer from a lot of mental disorders too, because your brain is actually meant to see. Like, you are overwhelmingly a visual creature. In fact, Dr. Andrew Huberman talks about this. Your eyes are actually part of your brain. It's not separate. It's like actually part of your brain. It just shoots out during like week 3 or something of your development. So the simulation theory is not new. This is something that we have been discussing for a while in Christianity. We believe that we are vessels, like we have a soul inside of us that is moving this bag of meat. And there's different ways to view it, but it's all basically the same. Like, we are in a simulation. We are being run by something or someone. And there's a concept, there's an idea of the ancestor simulation, meaning that there are a generation or 2 or 3 or 10 ahead of us who are playing as people from the past. It's kind of like kids today playing Red Dead Redemption. They want to see what it's like to be in the Wild West and play as cowboys. Like, that is in the past. And they're playing as the past because they have documentation. They know what it was like. It'll be fun. It's kind of predictable. So there's the theory, the overwhelming theory, that the people playing as us are actually people from the future. And so that's ancestor simulation. And if you look at video games, the progression of video games, it's not linear. It's exponential. If you take a video game graphic from 5 years ago, it's fucking laughable. Now it's almost insanely realistic. It's really crazy. So there's actually been an entire interview, a virtual reality interview done between Mark Zuckerberg and Lex Friedman. I highly suggest you guys check that out. But they're not in the same room, but they put on these glasses and they're literally face to face. And they already had a face scan so they can see all the pores, all the hairs. Like, it's insane what we have now. So just imagine what we're going to have in 1 year from now, or 5. So this begs the question, are you a free agent or are you an avatar that someone's playing as? It's fun to entertain. I do believe that I am being played as the Mateo character by something else. And I don't know who that is, but I do believe it's something in the future. And so when I get those deja vus, I am reminded that this is just the moment in my trailer that was shown to that person when they chose to play as the Mateo character. Now, people can use this to just completely surrender themselves to life. I don't think that's the way to go about it. But I do believe that it's very healthy to view yourself as a character, like an avatar. Like, oh, I want a sick life. Someone chose me to live as this life, so I have to make the most of it. I don't want to play as Mario and just stay at level 1. I want to fucking destroy Bowser, right? So you have to graduate through the levels. And people are already trying to force this concept into this reality. People are really pushing the Bitmojis and the avatars. And so the virtual realm for us, the digital realm, like, they want us to get really comfortable with the idea of like, oh, I have a little avatar. Like, people can interact with my avatar. Like, you have fat fuck people with really skinny avatars. They're pretending to be someone they're not. I believe the future is going to be the exact same thing. I don't even know if the guy playing as me is a guy. Like, I don't know, right? Or a human. We don't know. But we are just playing as these things. And I think rather than taking offense to it and rather than being scared of it, we should be open to the idea of like, oh, someone thought I am sick enough to play as me, so I want to make the most of it. So with the simulation theory, we actually have a trilemma. This was actually proposed by Nick Bostrom, who is a Swedish-born philosopher, and he's a professor at Oxford right now. He is the most cited professional philosopher under the age of 50. So key to note is that the human brain has some capabilities that the brains of other animals lack. So it is to these distinctive capabilities that our species owes its dominant position. If machine brains surpassed human brains in general intelligence, then this new superintelligence could become extremely powerful, possibly beyond our control. And as the fate of gorillas now depends more on humans than on the species itself, so would the fate of humankind depend on the actions of the machine superintelligence. But we have one advantage. We get to make the first move. So this is what we have with the simulation trilemma. One of these has to be true. Either there's a great filter. The great filter is as soon as a civilization gets close to this surpassing of superintelligence, that we cut off the simulation right before that. Like that is the moment we were like, all right, this is too far. We cut it off right there. That's the great filter. Or we actively reject this. Like we choose not to adopt this new technology. We choose to stay technologically inferior. Like we choose not to develop this type of technology. If you actually notice human beings, like it is too tantalizing. It's too tempting not to explore the technological advances. So to actively reject the advancement of AI, that's not going to happen, right? Or the third option that has to be true is that there are simulations all the way down. So like there's a simulation, and within that simulation, those people create a simulation, and then those people create a simulation. And so it's just all simulations all the way down. So of these three situations, one has to be true. And the one I choose to believe in is the simulations all the way down, because it makes the most probabilistic sense. So the best way I've found to conceptualize this idea is with the Russian dolls. So you and I, when we're born, we're told that we're in the base reality. They don't talk this way, but you and I believe that this is real. Like everything we're seeing right now, this is base reality. So it's like the first of the Russian dolls, right? The center. But with the simulations all the way down, it's actually all these simulations, these realities stacked into each other. So this is the best way I can conceptualize this idea. There's a base reality, and then there's future string realities stacked on top of it. Now, who would make this? Who would create a simulation for us like this? I believe it's more of a group effort, so I see it as a cabal. A cabal is a group of people who are united in some close design, usually to promote their private views or interests in an ideology. So these people tend to be very secretive, very protective. And the reason why I see the creators of the simulation as a cabal rather than as a benevolent entity is because you cannot really push this idea out to people without massive resistance. Also, if you want to know who controls you, look at who you cannot criticize. That should give you a hint. So who runs the world, right? There's different ways to view it, but I believe that look at the agenda. Like it doesn't matter what they're saying, look at what they do. So a lot of people are pushing the depopulation agenda, especially in the WF with Klaus Schwab there, the fucking Nazi. He and other people, they are really pushing the idea that the world is just going to be too overpopulated. We don't have enough resources. But time and time again, we just innovate. We create new ways to do it and figure it out. Like it's fine. Also, if you look at all these video game developers, these are the people who most likely are going to be creating the inner simulation within this reality. So it could be Sega, it could be Rockstar, any of these people, they probably are working hand in hand with Meta, with Google, like with all these people to really create the best simulation that we can. A really good way to conceptualize this is actually in the Black Mirror episodes. They talk about this really well and in depth, but people are just going to accept it because people's lives tend to be ass. People don't like to change. People are very lazy by design. So they will open arms accept this new world order, this new agenda of being told what to do, getting paid a universal based income, and not wanting anything other than stimulus of their dopamine. If people were offered the chance to get plugged into a chair that just stimulates their balls, that stimulates their brain, like they were going to accept that all the time. If they get fed through a tube, they're going to accept that condition all the time. And they're just going to renounce their agency, their freedom. So these people, they don't like the people who are autonomous, free agents, sovereign individuals. Like the people who resist, that are making their job much harder. And you can actually listen to the WF meetings. They're all online. And you can see how these people talk about us. It's disgusting. So naturally, the simulation is going to be extremely data intensive to program the entire world everywhere at once. But luckily, it doesn't have to be that way. They don't have to program everything. They just need to program and render the area that your avatar is looking at and what it's engaging with. It's just like a video game. So if we explore Descartes' concept of you exist because you think, that can be hacked. So if someone knows what you're thinking, then they can just render what you're thinking. They can just skip ahead and be like, oh, okay, he decided to walk down this road. All right, let's populate it with some NPCs. Let's populate it with some people. This is actually pretty scary. Like multiple times when I walk into a restaurant, and I did it with my dad, actually, I'll tell you a quick story. So my dad likes to bike. And so I went biking with him, and we went to a really small town, Virginia. And we were at it was like 3 p.m. or something, some weird time to eat. So we went into this store and we sat down and we wanted to order some food. And there was just one lady at the cashier, no kitchen. It was just her, right? She was running the whole thing. And the little restaurant diner was completely empty. And we were the only people there, right? And we sat down, and I had already been introducing my dad to these ideas, and he doesn't like it at all, by the way. But I told him, Dad, I don't know if you noticed, but there's not a single car in the parking lot. Not in the front, not in the back. Like, I don't know who this lady is. Maybe she got dropped off. She's pretty young, but there's no one here, right? But Dad, I guarantee you that within the next 5 to 10 minutes, this place is going to get filled with people. And he's like, what are you talking about? I was like, if you ever played a video game and you venture out to the far parts of the map, they don't let you venture out too far. They say you're out of the playable area, right? But if you're near those regions, if you really explore somewhere, you take a wide left and you explore somewhere you shouldn't be, then the game starts populating random people into your area. These are like Agent Smiths. They're there to spy on you, to make sure you're not doing anything you shouldn't, right? And I told him, I guarantee you in the next 5 to 10 minutes, this place is going to get full of people. And he's like, no, man, you don't know what you're talking about. I shit you not. Like 5 minutes later, an entire family walked in. They just got done with soccer or something, right? So there was 3 kids and 2 parents, and they sat in the table in the back there. And then a few minutes later, a couple walked in. Like this was like 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and we were the only people there. And then suddenly people wanted to eat this random place on the side of the road. Bullshit. And luckily I had told my dad before this would happen, and you should have seen the look on his face. So I believe that you should try to push the limits of your playable area as much as possible, because you will notice people start populating around you, and it's pretty weird. And don't do this too often, but you can just confront these people. Like if there's an NPC that populates near you in that area, you can just ask them, hey man, how you doing? What's up? I noticed your shoes. I like your shoes. And start like probing them a little bit. Like don't abuse it, but these people just freeze. All right, so the following slides are not for everyone. I'm serious. I'm dead serious. Like just stop. If you have ever seriously considered taking your life or someone else's, stop right now and seek professional help, okay? This module has been fun so far, but the rest of this gets pretty dark. So if you're not spiritually healthy, if you're not perceptually healthy, stop watching this. It's not worth it, okay? So we got a lot of really good slides in the rest of the modules. It's really good, but these next few, they're not for you, okay? And it's fine. You don't have to watch this. I'm dead serious. Just if you're not existentially sound or spiritually healthy, just stop, okay? Okay. So with the perspective of a video game, using that format, let's talk about how one can exit the game, right? The only way we know to exit this game, to exit this reality, is through death, right? That's the only way. And there are 3 ways, and only 3 ways to exit the game. You can either kill yourself, or in video game terms, rage quit, or you can die a natural death. And technically there is no natural death. There is no death by old age, right? Your body, when it ages, your immune system gets compromised, and then you die from some kind of illness. There is no natural death. That's why people are tapping into biohacking and biotech, and they're reaching that amortal status, right? There is no natural death. And then the third is to be killed, right? Like someone kills you or something kills you. Maybe you accidentally fall off a cliff or something. These are the only 3 ways to exit the game. Now, the idea of mass suicide has been contemplated by people before, and it's actually been done. It's walking hand in hand to the other side. If you ever heard the phrase drinking the Kool-Aid, it's an expression that refers to a mass suicide event that happened in 1978 with the temple. So the man on the left there, that is Jim Jones. He's actually going to be played in a movie by Leo DiCaprio explaining this whole thing, but he led a cult. So the cult was called the People's Temple. So Jim Jones, he actually led a retreat, an event, a 900-person event in Guyana in South America. And in that event, he was talking about what I was just talking, basically, that they were the promised people, that they're God, and that they should step into the other side. Now, there's been disputes whether he tricked people or not. So he actually put cyanide into the Kool-Aid where people were drinking from. And he basically told everyone, all right, let's drink this. And he himself, he died with everyone else. So 909 people died in this mass suicide event. I don't want to get too deep into this because it's pretty dark, but There have been other instances of people doing this. Like, this is the only way that people have thought of rage quitting the system. I believe it's one of the worst sins you can do. I think it's disgusting. I think it's cowardice at the most extreme. You have a family who depends on you. If not, you're a child of God. You are a source of life. You should not do this at all. It is demented. It is sick in the head type behavior. Don't do this shit. But I just wanted to highlight that there are people who have explored the simulation theory too much. Like, they treat it like a video game, and so they're all trying to rage quit and see what's on the other side. If you ever watched True Detective, Russ Cole talks about this concept too. Like, he doesn't have the constitution to kill himself, but he wants to, right? This is not the way to think. I think it's very, very sick in the head to do. I don't think you should do this, obviously. But the whole reason why I'm highlighting this is because there are forces that want you to do this. Like, there's the WF, there's all these people talking about depopulation. Just be extremely careful with this, because if you lack a purpose, you lack a mission, and you start entertaining these ideas, people just destroy themselves, like either literally killing themselves or destroy their lives. Like, don't do this. Now, the other two ways I don't really want to talk about too much because it's just way too dark. However, you can get around death. You can get pretty close to death when you sleep. So if we are going to relate this back into the video game analogy, it's when your character logs off. So the person playing as you, when he has to go, I don't know, go to school, or when he has to go do his chores, or he has to do something, he puts you on standby. And what happens is that your character, your avatar here, he goes to sleep, right? Have you ever stayed up multiple days in a row? I have. It's not cute. It's not fun. You actually start blurring a few things. Like, it's not okay. And if you stay up for way too long, you can actually fry your brain, and it's actually really unhealthy. But why is that? Why do we need to charge ourselves like a battery? Is it because we're like a video game where we can't just play for way too long? I believe that this is the moment that we are tapping into our batteries, like our battery packs. And what's actually interesting is you get people like Carl Jung who explores dreams. We all share the exact same dreams all the time. It's archetypes. Like, someone from Kenya and someone from Belarus, like, they all share the same archetype dreams. Same types of characters, same types of stories. Like, isn't that interesting? Like, you could dream anything you want in the world, but you are dreaming of the same type of archetypes. They're the same dream categories. That makes me think that we're all tapping to the same subconscious, the same source code. Now, another way you can get pretty close to death and then to the other side is with drugs. Now, I'm not condoning this at all, but there's a way people can really just shatter their paradigms in their brains, and they can just see things that aren't there. And so one thing that's actually really interesting with this is that, again, cross-culturally, cross-time, like, people see the exact same things. It's kind of like how animals, when they don't use any words, but they just pick up on each other's vibe, they're like, oh, there's danger here. Oh, this person's sick. Like, they just, without talking, without using words, they can just connect, right? People who get high, they communicate this. They feel this shared consciousness. And so where two people who have completely different brains, different bodies, they both share and relate the exact same thing that happened to them. They shared the exact same thing. They saw the exact same thing, and they were in different rooms. That is crazy, right? So this is a separate way that people can tap and get closer into death. I don't suggest you guys do this. I'm not condoning this, but it's really interesting to explore, because what this says is that your brain is the seat of your reality. If you can just play with your brain a little bit, then you literally played with reality. All right, so for your homework, we're going to identify which stage of moral metamorphosis you're in right now. Are you a camel, a lion, or a child? And be honest with yourself. Like, I personally am a lion. I cannot really make my own rules like this. I somewhat just give myself the space and the freedom to play around and not just accept everything. But I don't think I could ever psychologically get here. But just identify where you're at. Also, purposely switch things up for a day. Like, brush your teeth with your left hand, take a different route home. Like, just switch things up just for a day. Just see what happens. Also, this short video here, it's 10 minutes long. It's highlights exactly what the imposed paradigms and deeper incentives of people around you are. This was made 6 years ago. It's before the COVID vaccine. It's before all this stuff. And you should see that there is a repeatable pattern of things that people want you to do. And it touches on the systems and the cabal, like what they want you to do. It's a short watch. I highly suggest you guys watch that. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.